But here's the part investigators still can't fully explain. Nothing inside the house looked completely destroyed. No forced entry that clearly tells a story. No chaos that matches the amount of fear people imagine. And that's what made this case even more disturbing. Because when violence happens, you expect evidence to reflect it. Broken objects, clear struggle, noise. But in cases like this, sometimes everything looks almost controlled. And controlled scenes create one terrifying possibility. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Investigators began focusing on patterns, not just physical evidence, but behavioral patterns, daily routine, habits, movements. Who knew Nancy's schedule? Who knew when she would be alone? Who knew how long they had? Because crimes like this are rarely random. They require timing, and timing requires knowledge. Then came another question. Was Nancy being watched? This idea started spreading online after people began analyzing her routine and environment. Some believed the intruder may have known her habits. Others believed it was coincidence. But coincidence becomes harder to believe when timing is precise. And in this case, timing feels precise. Now think about this. A pacemaker doesn't just randomly stop transmitting at a dramatic moment. It stops when something happens to the body, which means investigators are not just looking for what happened. They're looking for the exact second it happened. And that's incredibly rare in investigations. Usually time is estimated. But here, time might be recorded, and that changes everything, because now there's a fixed point in the story, a moment that cannot be ignored, a moment that cannot lie, and everything before and after that moment must connect. But right now, it doesn't. Then there's the note, one of the most debated parts of the case, because ransom notes follow patterns, language patterns, behavior patterns, demand patterns, and when a note breaks those patterns, it becomes suspicious, very suspicious. Some people online believe the note was never meant to communicate. They believe it was meant to confuse, to delay, to misdirect, to create a false narrative. And if that's true, then the person behind it wasn't panicking. They were thinking, planning, adjusting, and that's where the psychological layer becomes terrifying, because impulsive crimes look messy. But controlled crimes look quiet. As investigators continued their work, another uncomfortable reality appeared. The lack of witnesses. No one clearly saw anything. No one heard anything significant. No one reported something that directly explains the moment. And that silence is not just unusual, it's strategic, or it's isolating.
Because environments like this create the perfect condition for something to happen without interruption. And once again, we return to the same idea. Timing, opportunity, control. Online, people started asking a different kind of question. What if the most important part of this case is something we're not seeing at all? Because sometimes, the absence of evidence is the evidence. Then came another theory, one that made people even more uncomfortable. What if this wasn't meant to be public? What if something went wrong? What if something escalated unexpectedly? Because not all crimes start with intention to kill. Some begin with control, with confrontation, with pressure. And then something changes. And when that change happens, everything becomes unpredictable. Investigators are trained to look for escalation, moments where behavior shifts, moments where control is lost, moments where decisions become irreversible. And somewhere in this timeline, there may be a point like that, but it hasn't been clearly identified. And that's why this case refuses to settle. Because it doesn't provide a clean story. It provides fragments, pieces that don't fully connect. Then there's another layer people don't talk about enough: digital silence. In modern cases, phones, devices, activity logs usually tell part of the story. Messages, calls, location data, online behavior. But when those signals go quiet at the same time, that becomes meaningful. Silence is data, and synchronized silence, that's even more suspicious. As weeks turned into months, public attention didn't disappear. It evolved. People stopped asking simple questions and started asking deeper ones. Not just, what happened. But what kind of situation leads to something like this? Because cases like this don't just scare people. They challenge assumptions. The assumption that danger is visible. The assumption that we would notice something wrong. The assumption that we could predict behavior. But the truth is, human behavior is complex. Sometimes people hide things. Sometimes situations develop quietly. Sometimes tension builds without anyone outside noticing. And then one day, everything breaks. That's why this case feels different, because it doesn't feel like an event. It feels like something that developed over time, something that reached a point and then crossed it. And once that line is crossed, there's no going back. Even now, investigators continue working, re-examining details, rechecking timelines, revisiting evidence, because cases like this are not solved quickly. They require patience, precision, and sometimes one small detail, just one, a piece of evidence, a contradiction, a mistake, something that doesn't fit. And once that detail is found, everything else starts to make sense. But until that moment happens, the case remains open, not just officially, but psychologically. Because people can't stop thinking about it. They replay the timeline. They imagine scenarios. They try to understand something that doesn't fully explain itself. And maybe that's why you're still watching. Not just for answers, but for clarity, for understanding, for closure. But here's the reality. Some cases don't give closure. Some questions don't get answers. And some moments stay incomplete. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The timeline is still under investigation. And the most important detail in this entire case may still be hidden somewhere no one has looked yet. And until that detail is found, this story isn't over. It's just waiting to be understood. If you've watched this far, you already understand this isn't just a story. This channel is built for people who think deeper, people who notice details, people who feel when something doesn't make sense. I'm putting real time into these investigations, building timelines, analyzing behavior, and turning cases into cinematic psychological stories you won't forget. If you want more videos like this, more hidden details, more disturbing mysteries, more cases that feel real, subscribe and be part of this. Because the next story might be even darker. And sometimes the truth is hidden where nobody thinks to look.